This is the video assignment for an industrial revolution. We're going to take a look at two labor strikes in the late 19th century. Be sure to have your review sheets handy as they will help you on the exam. We're going to look at two strikes. First strike is the Homestead Strike of 1892, and the second is the Pullman Strike of 1894. Homestead. It's a town just south of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, on the Monongahela River. It involved Carnegie Steel and the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers. Luckily for me, I do not have to say that tongue twister 5 times fast, although I do enjoy saying the word Monongahela. One of Andrew Carnegie's best talents, and by the way, the strike involves Carnegie Steel, one of Carnegie's best talents was finding the right man for the job. Often, Carnegie told a Pennsylvania businessman, "What I do is get good men, and I never give them orders. My directions suddenly go beyond suggestions." The Homestead Strike is going to test Carnegie's talent of finding the right man. For when the union's contract, the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers, its contract came up for renewal in 1802, Carnegie decided to take a summer vacation in his native Scotland, at one of the castles that he owned, and leave the negotiations in the hands of his manager, Henry Clay Frick. At Homestead, Frick decided to cut costs by eliminating jobs. Again, this is a Carnegie tactic, for Carnegie was obsessed with cost. Also, this is a blatant attempt to break the union. As negotiations dragged on, Frick announced that he would treat the workers as individuals until June 29, 1892, after which he would institute a lockout, and that would be in place until an agreement was reached. Now, a lockout is nothing more than an employer, quote, locking the employees out of the factory, unquote, thus keeping them from working in an effort to break their livelihood. Once broken, workers would abandon the union and come back to work with less benefits and security. Most recently, this has been a tactic used by players in the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL. To secure his lockout, Frick built a 12-foot fence around the plant and hired 300 Pinkerton detectives to protect the premises. Striking workers quickly dubbed the plant Fort Frick because it looked like a military installation. On July 6th, the workers engaged the Pinkerton detectives, who were hired by Frick to protect the plant, engaged their detectives in a battle. As the detectives made their way down the Monongahela River to the plant from Pittsburgh, strikers harassed them, and just like in the Haymarket affair, no one knows who fired the first shot. The battle ended when the Pinkerton detectives surrendered. They fled back to Pittsburgh while strikers taunted in the streets of Homestead. Within 3 days, the Pennsylvania State Militia arrived to restore order and to protect Frick's strikebreakers. The strike ended in November. It was a failure for the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers. The immediate effect of the strike was that Frick killed the union movement at Homestead. Of course, it did not help the union's position when a Lithuanian immigrant tried to assassinate Frick. And even though Carnegie supported Frick's actions, he chose to remain blissfully ignorant of the strike while in Scotland. And once he returned, he replaced Frick with Charles Schwab, yes, that Charles Schwab, as his right-hand man. Some historians argue that the aftermath of the Homestead Strike is what convinced Carnegie to give up so much of his fortune later in life. So, did Carnegie hire the right man for the job? Yes, he did. Frick did what he was supposed to do. But did Carnegie feel bad about it later? Quite possibly, for Carnegie created pension funds for the Homestead Strikers. Significance of the Homestead Strike is that it showed that the unions were still not powerful enough to make demands if management was determined to break their will by any means necessary. It also proved that although Carnegie seemed benevolent toward his employees, he also had no problem killing the unions. Now, the second strike that hurt the labor movement in the Industrial Revolution was the Pullman Strike of 1894. The strike saw the most notable walkout in American history. At the same time, it paralyzed the economy in the western half of the nation. How was this accomplished? The Pullman Palace Car Company made the passenger cars for all trains. Yes, even that train. When the American Railway Union went on strike at Pullman's factory near Chicago in May 1894, railroad workers simply refused to attach Pullman cars to trains. And since all the trains used Pullman cars, the trains did not move, creating a bottleneck. Might I add here, this is the effectiveness of the American Federation of Labor. One union has gone on strike. All the railroad brotherhoods support that union's actions. The issue here in 1894 was wage cuts. Workers of the American Railway Unions opposed wage cuts at the Pullman Palace Car Factory that management implemented in the economic panic of 1893. More about that in the Gilded Age. The American Railway Union was led by Eugene Debs, a man of towering influence and charismatic appeal. He quit school at the age of 14 and went to work for an Indiana railroad. After Debs founded the American Railway Union in 1893, it gained power quickly and nationally. And when the union struck at the Pullman plant, the strike tied up most Midwestern railroads. Debs made an attempt to arbitrate the issue with George Pullman, the owner of the Pullman Palace Car Company, but Pullman refused. Now, arbitration is the use of an independent person to settle a dispute. In today's world, it is most common with free agents and management in sports. The strike broke after the federal government got involved. And how could the government get involved with this? Well, it's because the mail ran on the trains and the strike interfered with the handling of the U.S. mail. Perhaps the post office should advertise that neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night, nor railroad strikes shall keep the mail from being run. The U.S. Attorney General swore in 3,400 deputies to keep the trains running. In response, angry workers ignored Debs' call for an orderly boycott. Strikers destroyed property and attacked strikebreakers. The Attorney General then issued a court order forbidding any interference with the mail. On July 3, 1894, President Grover Cleveland sent federal troops into Chicago to enforce the court order. His justification for doing this was that the strike violated the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. The Sherman Antitrust Act sought to incorporate in the federal law a long-standing principle opposing activities that resulted in a restraint in trade. It forbade contracts, combinations, or conspiracies that established monopolies in interstate and foreign commerce. Like its name, it was originally designed to take down the trusts, like Standard Oil. In this case, the Sherman Antitrust Act stated that strikes or boycotts interfere with interstate commerce, not to mention the delivery of the mail. After violating the injunction imposed by the federal government, Eugene Debs was arrested, convicted, and served a 6-month sentence. With Debs in jail, the injunction broke the union, which called off the strike on July 13, 1894. While in jail, Debs became a socialist. Debs would later run for president 5 times as a socialist, from 1904 to 1920. His best showing would be in 1912. In 1916, he would be imprisoned again for violating the Espionage Act. Thus, his 1920 presidential run was from jail. On canvas, there is a political cartoon depicting Camp Debs' first move if he were elected, which would be to pardon himself. Also here is a political button that demonstrates Debs' legal status in 1920. The Homestead Strike of 1892 and the Pullman Strike of 1894 hurt the labor movement because the entrepreneurs, management, were able to use the government to put down these labor disturbances. Once demands were not met by nonviolent means, striking workers turned to violence and chaos in an attempt to achieve their demands. These actions only justified management's call for the government to enter the dispute on their side. Yet at the same time, these strikes laid the foundation for the battle of reform that will occur during progressive America. Thank you for watching.